Your father, or his absence, has instilled in you a weakness for women at a very deep level in your personality. This isn't your fault. It's due to external factors. But if you don't stay until the end of the video to take responsibility, the blame for you remaining a man ignored by women is entirely yours. Few men have the courage to admit it, but much of our weakness with women stems not from a lack of courage, but from over-domestication. We were trained not to frighten, not to invade, not to disturb. Society, through the sweet words and cautious advice of our parents, trained us to be harmless. And a woman doesn't desire the harmless. She can respect, she can trust, she can even get attached. But she doesn't surrender. She doesn't get excited. She doesn't dissolve in the touch of a man she feels she can control. Female desire doesn't respond to the rational logic your father used to teach you about relationships. It responded to instincts. And instincts don't have good manners. Your father may have been a good man, loving, responsible, but perhaps he was also emotionally neglectful. Maybe he never taught you how to deal with rejection, only told you to respect her when she says no, which is correct but incomplete. Maybe he never showed you what masculine presence is, only repeating that the important thing is to have character. And again, that's true, but it's far from enough. Maybe he never told you that women, on some level, test men to sense their emotional makeup, and that if you falter in the test, even with a sweet smile, she loses her desire. What your father handed you was a model of social security, not a seduction map. And why would he do this? Out of ignorance? Partly yes, but also out of fear. Fear that you would replicate the mistakes he himself made, or worse, that you would become a freer, more sexually fulfilled, more magnetically potent man than he ever was. There's a shadow in many fathers, a shadow that can't bear to see his son surpass him in the game of life. And this shadow disguises itself as good advice. It's when he says, "Watch out for these girls these days," but never teaches you how to read a woman's signals of interest. Or when he says, "Don't force anything," but never shows you how to create tension, how to make a woman desire you before even touching her. The traditional father delivers a functional man to society, but incapable of generating fascination. We need to go deeper. The emotional upbringing of many men was based on repression, suppressing tears, suppressing desire, suppressing anger, suppressing impulse. We grew up believing that seduction was something dirty, manipulative, and that we should limit ourselves to being ourselves, even when our self was completely distorted by the absence of powerful male role models. What you call your personality may just be a mold created to fit your father's expectations, a mold that stifles your most primal instinct, the need to be desired. Carl Jung said, "What you resist, persists." Modern man, by resisting his own shadow, his erotic, dominant, unpredictable side, ends up feeding his own emptiness. And this emptiness translates into insecurity, social anxiety, lukewarm relationships, and accumulated frustrations. Your father, wanting to protect you, disarmed you. He gave you a shield, but never a sword. Worse, he taught you not to care about the game as if it were a virtue. The famous phrase, "Whoever chases a woman is a fool," is nothing more than a defensive rationalization of men who never learned to seduce. It's a code of cowardice. Your father may have married the first woman he noticed and spent the rest of his life convinced it was love, when, in reality, it was fear disguised as stability. But there's an even more perverse aspect, the archetype of the moral man. This is the father who prides himself on being faithful, on never cheating, on paying the bills on time, on never looking the other way. But his son grows up seeing an emotionally dissatisfied mother, a marriage devoid of touch, devoid of play, devoid of sexual tension. And he learns silently that being good means giving up desire, that loving means stifling instinct, that being faithful means being neutral. This kind of moralism doesn't create strong men, it creates amputated men, men who live in fear of their own desires. Now think, how many men do you know who are good fathers but terrible lovers? How many are respected at work but disrespected at home? How many know how to care for a child but don't know how to touch a woman with the energy of a whole man? And what's more, how many of these men shaped the men of your generation? This is where the cycle reveals itself. We are children of emotionally domesticated fathers, and we are being judged by women who desire intensity, emotionally integrated masculinity, and magnetic presence, qualities we were never taught. It's not your fault you don't know how to seduce, but it's your responsibility to learn. Robert Bly in Iron Man talks about the importance of the symbolic father, the one who, unlike the biological father, guides a man out of emotional childhood. He argues that without this archetypal father, a man grows attached to his mother, not to the real woman, but to the symbolic feminine. He lives in search of approval, acceptance, permission, and the woman feels this. She feels she is facing a man who needs her to validate his masculinity, and this kills desire. See the irony. The same father who taught you to be gentle may have been responsible for distancing you from magnetic masculinity. He trained you to be chosen for being good, but forgot to show you how to be desired for being fascinating. Deep down, he prepared you for social interaction, but not for the war of attraction. And war is the right word, because seduction, on many levels, is a silent battle. It's tension, it's reading territory, it's attack and retreat, it's emotional dominance. And you were prepared to negotiate, not to conquer. You were trained to yield, not to make an impact. Your father wanted you to be loved, but he didn't teach you to be irresistible. Herein lies the fatal contradiction. Women say they want a sensitive man, but they instinctively respond to a man who leads, who creates tension, who stirs their emotions, even if it irritates them. They say they want stability, but their bodies react to the organized chaos of a man who isn't afraid to lose. Your father taught you to please, but the female body doesn't desire the pleaser. It desires the man who knows when to challenge, when to be silent, when to dominate, and when to disappear. And this isn't their fault. It's biology, psychology, and archetypal narrative. Every woman carries within her the duality between the desire for the nurturer and the desire for the conqueror. The problem is that you've only learned to be a nurturer, and when she finds someone who represents the latter, you feel betrayed. But the real betrayal was something else. It was the silent betrayal of your male role model. This is the time to break away, to stop repeating inherited phrases as if they were truths. Understanding that the world has changed, that dynamics have changed, and that your father's model, however well-intentioned, has left you vulnerable on a battlefield that demands tactics, presence, and emotional intelligence. You don't have to become a scoundrel. It's not about being insensitive or dishonest. It's about understanding that the game of attraction isn't won by the most ethical, but by the most magnetic. Ethics without presence is invisibility. Kindness without tension is boredom. And you weren't born to be invisible. You were born to be remembered. In the end, the truly good man is the one who masters himself, who understands his power but chooses how and when to use it, who doesn't hide behind decency to justify his inability to seduce, who honors his ancestry, even surpassing it. Being better than your father isn't disrespectful, it's redemption. It's liberation. And here begins the real journey, because understanding that your father weakened you is just the first blow. What comes next is deeper, darker, and more transformative, because it's not just about what he taught you, it's about what he never had the courage to say, about the fears, the traumas, the repressed feelings he carried and passed on to you without realizing it. What he kept silent became what you repeat. There's a kind of inheritance that doesn't appear in a will. It doesn't come in the form of land, money, or property. It settles in your body, in your language, in your silence. And most dangerous of all, it's passed from father to son without anyone noticing. This inheritance has no signature, but it defines your destiny. And perhaps it's the real reason you feel weak around women, uncomfortable in your own skin, disconnected from your desire. It's the invisible inheritance, the emotional traumas, the unresolved fears, the silent codes you inherited from the man who most influenced your development, even if he never said a word to you about love, sex, or power. What your father didn't say shaped you more than anything he said, because every father carries a level of pain he couldn't process. And when that pain isn't healed, it becomes a pattern. And patterns aren't taught, they're absorbed. When you see your father back down from an argument with your mother, even if he says he doesn't like to fight, you learn to avoid confrontation. When you see your mother emotionally frustrated yet still staying in the marriage, you learn that love means enduring discomfort. When you grow up in a home where affection is rare, praise is absent, and touch is punishment, You learn that love must be earned with effort. And that's exactly how you enter the game of seduction. Believing you need to prove you deserve to be loved. But love isn't proven. Desire isn't begged for. True connection isn't born from trying to please. It's born from the raw, non-negotiable presence of someone who is whole. And you weren't taught to be whole. You were taught to be acceptable. And the inheritance you carried was that of the fragmented man. In archetypal psychology, there's a concept called shadow transference. It's when a father unconsciously projects his unresolved fears onto his son, who begins to live under the weight of these pains, even without knowing they're not his own. If your father feared rejection, you grew up believing rejection is humiliation. If he had traumatic experiences with women, betrayal, abandonment, disrespect, he may have unwittingly instilled in you a defensive and cautious view of femininity. And you grow up with the idea that women are a risk, not a pleasure, that love is dangerous, that being vulnerable is weakness, that showing desire is exposing yourself too much. But here's the irony. The more you hide desire, the more it rots inside you. And this rot doesn't manifest as pent-up strength, but as insecurity, anxiety, and bodily disconnection. You become a man who lives in his head, not his body, who thinks too much but feels too little, who seeks perfect speech instead of the silence that imposes presence. And this isn't bad luck, it's programming. Consider, how many times, when trying to seduce a woman, have you felt your energy flag? How many times have you hesitated with your touch, your gaze, your approach? How many times have you started a conversation intensely, but felt something stall? This something has a name, and a surname. It smells of childhood, the voice of an absent father, and the shape of silence at dinner. It's the echo of everything you didn't receive. It's the emotional code you inherited. And it doesn't matter if your father was physically present. Many men grew up with a father at home. But emotionally absent, a man who talked about work, soccer, and politics, but never about how he felt, never about his insecurities, never about his relationship with his own masculinity. And this silence became the norm. You learn not to ask questions, not to show fragility, not to express desire. Because desire for your father was a forbidden subject. Or worse, it was a threat. This emotional inheritance shaped the way you relate to women. You're not seducing a woman today. You're unconsciously trying to earn the validation you didn't receive from your mother, and the silent approval of your father. You try to please, not because you want to be chosen, but because you desperately need to feel enough. And that's the opposite of seduction. Seduction isn't about begging for acceptance. It's about exuding so much personal power that the other person feels, before they understand, that they need to be around you. Nietzsche said that a man must have chaos within himself to give birth to a dancing star. But your father tried to erase your chaos. He believed that giving you emotional control was giving you strength, but he confused control with repression. And you grew up learning to numb emotions instead of mastering them. The result? You became a predictable man. And nothing kills desire faster than predictability. Women don't want a gentle robot. They want a man with layers. With shadows, with contradictions that reveal depth. The man who causes discomfort, not because he's aggressive, but because he's too intense to ignore. But how can you access that intensity if all you've learned is to protect yourself? How can you generate fascination if your presence was shaped to please, not to impact? Robert Greene explains in The Art of Seduction that the true seducer is the one who understands the other's imagination and knows how to position himself as an unconscious response to that imagination. But how will you understand the female imagination if you've never even understood your own? How can you be a mirror of desire if you live in fear of reflecting your own truth? This fear is learned, pure inheritance. Your father, perhaps without realizing it, was uncomfortable with his own virility. Perhaps he grew up in a time when masculinity was synonymous with brutality, and to avoid repeating this pattern, he chose the opposite extreme: neutralization, symbolic castration. He taught you to be good, not whole, to be predictable, not wild, to be admired, not desired, and worst of all, he made you believe this was right. But what's right for fear is wrong for desire. Fear wants comfort, desire wants intensity. Fear wants certainty, desire feeds on doubt. And as long as you continue repeating the emotional script you inherited, you'll be playing the game of seduction with an outdated manual. A manual you didn't write, and one that's definitely not suitable for today's times. The modern woman is more in touch with her desires, more selective, more intuitive. And you, still trying to apply tactics inherited from a father who never understood femininity, will seem out of place, artificial, energetically weak. Not out of malice, but out of emotional obsolescence. You were trained to seduce a woman who no longer exists, and you ignored that your energy doesn't yet exist either. Reconstruction begins with an act of courage, confronting your masculine model, questioning everything you've learned, and understanding that love, desire, and power are not separate things. The truly seductive man is one who integrates desire with respect, vulnerability with strength, chaos with clarity. But before that, he needs to cleanse his inheritance. Because as long as you carry your father's fear, you will hesitate. As long as you carry your mother's repression, you will sabotage yourself. And as long as you run from your own shadow, you will continue repeating the same patterns, attracting those who don't desire you, desiring those who ignore you, and living lukewarm relationships where you nullify yourself in the name of a peace no one asked for. The good news? The invisible inheritance can be broken. But this requires a brutal act, symbolically killing your father. Not in the physical sense, obviously, but in the emotional sense. You need to become the man he wasn't. You need to take on the mission of rewriting your masculine code. You need to stop seeking approval from older men and start building the perspective of a man who leads his own narrative. This is where the inner father is born, the symbolic figure who guides you, not with weak advice, but with real presence. It's when you stop acting like a boy trying to get it right and start acting like a man who experiments, who feels, who makes mistakes, who corrects, who leads, who magnetizes. And make no mistake, women feel it when this process happens. They can't explain it, but they feel it. They react differently. They begin to open up more, to test you more, to become more aroused by your mere presence. Because your energy has shifted, you're no longer there trying to conquer, you're just being. And this being is the most powerful weapon of seduction. The time has come to break the cycle. To accept that what you inherited may explain your pain, but it will never again justify your weakness. The time has come to be the first in your lineage to create a new standard of masculinity. One that doesn't reject desire, but dominates it. That doesn't fear the feminine, but dances with it. That does not sabotage itself, but expresses itself clearly. Everything you've inherited can be undone. No trauma is a sentence. No programming is a life sentence. The truth is brutal, but liberating. You owe no allegiance to the emotional weakness that came before you. Your father may have given you life, but now it's your responsibility to become the man he lacked the courage or awareness to be. And from the moment you accept this mission, a new lineage begins. You are no longer the heir to a tepid masculinity. You are the ancestor of a dynasty that is reborn with you. What differentiates the men who fascinate, dominate, and leave a mark from those who are forgotten, ignored, or treated as second best isn't beauty, money, or cliches. It's presence. It's an identity that has been consciously reconstructed. These men at some point went through what you went through. Doubt, rejection, a feeling of being invisible. But they didn't stay stuck there. They broke through. And breaking through is a violent verb. Because to be reborn, you must die. Die to the personality that was imposed on you. To your father's voice that still lives in your mind, telling you, that's not a man's thing. To your childhood programming that made you believe that wanting to be desired is shameful. It's not. It's sacred. Seduction isn't manipulation. It's a full expression of your inner magnetism. The new dynasty begins with silence. Because only in deep silence will you hear your true voice. And that voice will tell you that you don't need to be the best in the world. You just need to be the most present man in the room. The one who doesn't seek approval. The one who doesn't hide behind nervous jokes or a tough guy stance. The one who looks you in the eye with firmness and calm. The one who knows he can leave at any moment, but chooses to stay because he masters his energy. A woman senses this. And this is where the reversal begins. You stop chasing and start being orbited. But to do so, you need to cleanse. You need to pull out the roots of what's holding you back. A truly magnetic man is one who reconciles with his demons, who doesn't pretend not to be afraid, but isn't controlled by it, who feels comfortable in his own sexual tension, who doesn't hesitate to speak his mind, nor to create silence when necessary. He's not reactive, he's strategic. He doesn't act to please, he acts to lead. And that's not arrogance, it's clarity. This is where many confuse seduction with toxic domination. But no, true seduction is based on freedom. You don't need to control anyone, you simply activate desire. And those who desire offer themselves, they surrender. Seduction is allowing a woman to feel she can surrender, because she's before someone who knows how to lead, who knows how to touch, who knows how to silence. This is emotional power, and power isn't something you ask for, it's something you emanate. Reconstructing your masculine identity requires practice. Theory liberates, but action transforms. So here are practical tactics you can incorporate starting now. First, feel your body before speaking. Slow breathing, controlled movement, pause between sentences. This isn't theater, this is a command. The man who speaks breathlessly is the man who needs to convince. The man who speaks slowly and intensely is the one who has already won over before the answer. Second, choose when to speak and when not to speak. Many men sabotage their presence because they fear silence. But silence, when used well, creates tension. And tension, well managed, creates excitement. If she's interested, she'll fill the void. And by filling it, she reveals what she desires. You just need to be present enough to listen. Third, have a look that invites and tests at the same time. The look is your first weapon of seduction. And here's a secret. The look of a man who knows himself is almost unbearable for a woman accustomed to fragile men. Because he sees beyond the makeup, beyond the ego, beyond the defenses. He sees the soul. And when she feels seen, not just looked at, she either backs away or surrenders. Fourth, master strategic vulnerability. This isn't about being weak, it's about showing depth, that you're not afraid to share a pain, a failure, a real fear. But be careful. Too much vulnerability without leadership energy turns you into a patient, not a partner. The key is balance. Sharing, yes, but with poise, with control, with rhythm. Fifth, be unpredictable with purpose. Women don't fall in love with routine. They're enchanted by the feeling that something new can happen at any moment, that you're stable, but not monotonous, that you have roots, but also wings. Predictability is the tomb of desire. An unexpected gesture, an unusual response, a reversal of expectations, all of these are weapons. Friday, integrate the archetypes of the king and the warrior. The king is sovereign, calm, strategic, and thinks long-term. The warrior is action, intensity, and physical presence. A man who unites these two archetypes, even without words, emanates a kind of energy that commands respect and desire simultaneously. He doesn't need to prove himself. He just needs to enter the room, and everything around him falls into place. But none of this works if you're still trying to be the nice guy. The new dynasty is born when you say goodbye to the good guy and embrace the real man. The man who makes mistakes but learns, who feels but leads, who desires but doesn't beg, who becomes the archetype he himself needed in his youth. This man isn't waiting outside of you. He's trapped behind years of conditioning, inherited traumas, and blind obedience to failed models. It's time to free him. You can be the first in your lineage to unapologetically be a man, to unapologetically desire, to unapologetically hide your voice, your intensity, your presence. You can be the ancestor of a new generation of men who aren't defined by the weakness of those who came before, but by the courage of those who decided to rewrite everything. The real turning point is realizing that being irresistible isn't about doing something. It's about stopping repressing what's already inside you. You don't need pickup artist techniques. You need reconnection with your body, with silence, with your truth. A man aligned with himself is more dangerous than any rehearsed script. Because he creates his own game, he sets the pace. He doesn't need the woman, but his presence is so dense, so charged with magnetism, that she feels that she needs him. And when she feels this, there's no logic that can save her. Her body responds, her mind surrenders, her soul opens, because the man she's been searching for has finally appeared. And he didn't arrive from outside, he emerged from within. You are that man. But only if you have the courage to kill your emotional father. Only if you have the discipline to rebuild yourself. Only if you have the ambition to stop being a repetition and become a legacy. The new dynasty begins the moment you decide that the weakness you inherited will not be passed on. And when that moment arrives, everything changes. The world looks at you differently. Women feel differently about you. Your energy enters first, and your voice only confirms what your body has already said. Here is a man who knows himself, who embraces himself, who is self-sufficient. This man doesn't ask permission. He doesn't beg for affection. He doesn't disguise his desire with passive-aggressive kindness. He arrives, observes, feels, and chooses. Not because he's superior, but because he's aligned. He doesn't need excuses to exist. You were born into a story written by other men. A story of silence, of restraint, of fear disguised as morality. And for years you believed that seduction was talent, when in fact it's liberation. Liberation from the emotional father who weakened you. Liberation from the standards you didn't choose. Liberation from the image of the good man that society loves, but that women forget. If you've made it this far, you've already taken the first step. You've shattered the illusion. You've seen the invisible inheritance, and now you're ready for something few men dare to experience, the conscious construction of your new masculine identity. One that isn't inherited, it's created. One that doesn't depend on luck, it depends on choice. But for this, you need more than awareness. You need weapons, techniques, strategic refinement, tools that take your presence from interesting to unforgettable. So, if this video resonated with you, the next step is at your fingertips. The Forbidden Manual, How to Trigger Desire in 60 Seconds, is the definitive guide for men who no longer want to demand attention, they want to command it. This over 7-hour audiobook features practical strategies, psychological triggers of desire, irresistible body language, and most importantly, how to make an impact on a woman before she even opens her mouth. If you feel like you've been trained to be invisible, this manual was designed to make you inevitable.